go. Hello once again, YouTube. It is I, East. I've ditched the normal orange hoodie of run commentary for this, the gray hoodie of analysis. I've recently completed all weapons, Underworld, and Surface on 62 Fear. Having completed all 12 of those runs, I wanted to share a little bit of the insight that I've gained from playing them, particularly as it pertains to the Arcana cards. I'm going to go in depth on each card, talk about potential use cases, good combos, whether or not I use them on my 62 Fear runs, and how powerful I felt they were, and whether or not I would recommend that you use them, and in what situations. I'm not going to be doing anything like a tier list or giving anything a ranking or a rating. If you want to know, I used every single Arcana card in the list here except for Unseen, Excellence, Enchantress, Champions, and Fates. Those are the only 5 cards that don't show up in any of my records on the Crossroads, and that I didn't use at any point during the 12 runs. And I'll get into why when we get into each card. It's going to be a bit of a longer video, lots of talking, so let's drink some water, and let's get into it. Alright. First card off the hop, we've got Sorceress. Your Omega moves are 30% faster. Sorceress is very much a question of, are you using an Omega move or not? If you are, you're probably going to take Sorceress. If you're not, there are still some niche situations in which you wouldn't mind using the Arcana card. A good example would be if your build has 29 of the total 30 grasp available, and you just want one grasp for something that lets you use an Omega move right at the start of a fight so that your Huntress Arcana is activated, then it's really useful. Obviously, aspects that really take advantage of Omega moves, things like Momus, Charon, that I played over the course of these runs, those builds really appreciate 30% faster Omega moves. It's really not that deep. If you're using Omegas, take Sorceress. If you're not using Omegas, probably don't. Yeah, it obviously works pretty well with Eternity. It has a weird interaction with Eternity, where Eternity stops working as soon as you channel things. So Sorceress speeding up your channel speed by 30% actually makes the time slow from Eternity a bit slower, but the Omega move is active anyways, so who cares? Next up, we have the Wayward Son. This is a pretty straightforward card. It doesn't do anything at 62 Fear. This would normally restore health every location, but with Vow of Scars active, and Vow of Scars is always active at 62 Fear, the Wayward Son is useless. It doesn't do anything. However, you might have noticed at the start of the video, I did not include Wayward Son as one of the cards that I did not use. Sometimes you have 29 Grasp, and you need a card. I just threw Wayward Son in there instead of playing 29. You can also run it on the surface. There is, I believe, a 1 in, I want to say 15 or so chance for your NPC encounter with Circe to use Black Knight Banishment to purge the Vow of Scars, at which point Wayward Son would be active, and that makes it better than running 29 Fear instead, for example. Sorry, 29 Grasp. I get Grasp and Fear mixed up a lot. You'll probably hear that a lot during the course of the video. But, other than that, not much else to say. It doesn't work. Huntress. While you have less than 100% of your mana, your attack and special deal 50% damage. I find that I use Huntress a lot. I used it a lot over the course of these runs. Most aspects that are not Omega move spamming aspects really appreciate plus 50% damage on their attack and special early on in the run. It's not by any means an absolutely mandatory Arcana card. It should be noted that all of my runs at 62 Fear were done with the Jeweled Palm Keepsake, and the Jeweled Palm Keepsake giving you Gagaro's Dash does make up for a lot of the damage loss you would get from not running Huntress. The Scorn effect from Gagaro's Dash increases the damage of your attack and special in a similar way. That being said, Huntress is a really good take for pretty much any manaless build. You use an Omega move once at the start of the encounter, and your attack and special jump up in terms of percentage damage. Should be pointed out that Huntress does not increase the effectiveness of things like Blitz and Scorch and Hephaestus Blasts, and all those things are really popular and very effective. So late game it tends to fall off, but it is a great early game damage solve for Ephira and Erebus. No other real reasons not to worry about taking Huntress. Oftentimes you'll prime out, or you'll pick up a gain that you can't help but use, like Glamour Gain, but usually the trade-offs from taking those things are worth it, and Huntress is just an early game option to get you through. Next up we have Eternity. I have a question regarding Huntress from chat. What gains do you try to avoid if Huntress is active, and will you seek out magic to avoid overpriming? I kind of just spoke about this, but I generally don't care if I turn off Huntress's effectiveness. Usually the thing that I'm taking, whether or not it's Glamour Gain, or priming out by taking things like Static Shock or Trusty Shield, or a lot of like really good boons, that's worth giving up Huntress. It's absolutely not completely necessary to keep Huntress later into the game like that. I will say though that Huntress's existence is a discouraging factor for me not wanting to take Hephaestus's Tough Gain. That boon provides a small damage reduction, but replenishes your mana every time you get hit. I normally will avoid Tough Gain, and part of the reason is that I don't find that its benefits are worth turning off Huntress very often. Eternity. Eternity was run in a couple of Surface runs that used Omega moves, and also was used in the aspect of Nurgle's Underworld run. Eternity, I think, is one of the largest beneficiaries of the fact that the Jeweled Palm makes it so that you never want to take Enchantress, Champions, and Fates. So you have like 7 free grasp to kind of throw around in most builds, and a lot of things that use like the Omega Spin on Nurgle, the Omega moves in general on Momus, the Omega Special on Charon, all of these actually really appreciate Eternity. I want to give a special shout out to Eternity specifically for the Surface. Omega move focused builds on the Surface have a real problem with dealing with Eris and Prometheus as particular boss fights, and Eternity is a huge help for an aspect like Charon to just be able to hit Eris before she flies away or flies up in the air. You want to be able to land your damage. Eternity is a great way to do that. Other than that, I wouldn't really recommend it too much. I have heard a lot of people say that Eternity is like a time loss or that it's slow. I think if you just practice with it and get used to using it more, that's not really the case. So solid thing for Omegas, definitely underrated in terms of something you can take to make Omega moves better. The Moon. I'm actually going to talk about the Moon a little bit in the context of manaless builds. Normally, if you are running a build that uses Omegas, you are playing one of Eternity or Night, in which case Moon will be active already and you don't have to worry about it. It's great to have some mana recharge. I will say that I find Hexes to be way more effective used in the Surface than on the Underground. In particular, Lunar Ray and Night Bloom are very, very powerful hexes that you can get for the Surface. For the Underworld, I would say, and if you can get the Hestia Godsent, Total Eclipse is good against Sirens, and other ones have like some benefits. I know Darkside with a lot of Godsent investment can also be quite strong, but I tend not to care as much about hexes when played in the Underworld. Twilight Curse is a good shout out as well for both Underworld and Surface. Good defensive option in terms of hexes. In terms of manaless runs, with Jeweled Palm, you often can't control whether or not you get a hex in the first place. So if I have the grasp to afford it, I will run Night just so that the Moon gets turned on. And even on a manaless build, it does make a substantial difference. So do consider, if you are often picking up hexes in your run, especially if you're doing Surface runs, I would consider picking up Night even if you have no intention of using it, just because it activates the Moon, and having that 3-second charge up, super useful as well. All right, moving back over, we've got card number 6. This is the Furies. The Furies deals 30% damage to foes in your casts. I don't believe I ever turned this off. I think it was on pretty much the entire run. It's 30% global damage. So this is a little bit different than Huntress's 50% attack and special damage. This damage from Furies, it applies to Zeus's Blitz, Hestia's Scorch, Tidal Ring, Storm Ring, Rapture Ring. All forms of Olympian damage get boosted by the Furies, and that alone makes it a really, really strong card. It helps early game in terms of damage. It helps late game in terms of multiplying your your Olympian damage sources. Furies is a fantastic card. Again, I don't believe I ever turned it off. I could only see there being an appetite to not using it if you had a specific build that really wanted Huntress. Furies is a fantastic card. Persistence. I just talked about how fantastic and Furies is and how I never turned it off. I actually lied. There's one situation where I did turn off Furies. That was because the 62 Fear run that I did on Circe for the Underworld actually played Judgement and didn't have Furies on. But I did have Persistence on. Wow, what a card. Plus 40 health, plus 40 max mana. In both runs, not so much the Surface with Aphira, but Surface in general tries very, very hard to kill you. And in the Underworld, Erebus can be a very difficult part of your run, the very opening part of your run. Persistence, it gives you a ton of health, it gives you a ton of mana. There's nothing like it in all of the other Arcana cards that you're offered, really. It's survivability, it's mana output for Omega builds. Fantastic card. It should always be on. I've always had it on. Great card. The Messenger. There's lots of... I think there's a fair few runs that I've done that didn't actually take advantage of the Messenger. This is your cast momentarily make you impervious and move 70% faster. Minor note about this card. This part where it says your casts momentarily make you impervious and move 70% faster, that 70% only applies to Millennium's base movement speed. So on some aspects, like for example, the aspect of Supe, which is sprinting a lot and always using the sprint to move around, the Messenger actually doesn't make you move any faster. It does make you impervious, but it doesn't give you that movement speed boost. So I didn't use it on Supe, either for Underworld or for Surface, I believe. I might have used it for Underworld, I'm not sure, but I don't think so. It is not a particularly useful card there. Also, if you're using ranged casts, or you're just using Omegas, you don't have room. Oftentimes, if you're going to be running something like Eternity or Night, cards that don't normally see play, you're just not going to have enough room to run Messenger, or maybe you have 29 Grasp, and you have to choose between Sorceress and Messenger for a build that uses one Omega move. Maybe you'll prefer Sorceress. But on Manaless, Messenger is very strong. It's totally viable, and something that I would definitely consider on Manaless builds quite a bit. Next we have the Unseen. The Unseen is one of the few unfortunate cards that I did not select over the course of my all weapons 62 Fear Underworld and 62 Fear Surface. The Unseen, on the face of it, sounds good. You restore 10 mana every second. The main thing the game doesn't tell you about this is you don't restore the mana while you're channeling Omega moves. Regeneration is turned off. Things that restore flat mana, like Flood Gain, or Born Gain, or Lucid Gain, those things all work while you're channeling Omegas. Unseen, Glamour Gain, Tranquil Gain, other regeneration-based gains do not work. For that reason alone, Unseen is a very, very tough ask to take for 5 Grasp. On top of that, Jeweled Palm adding 3+ levels to everything that you pick up actually makes Unseen an even worse take, because you're even more likely to get a gain that will solve your mana issues for you completely. Common gains, Common Born Gain, Common Lucid Gain, these are gains, the power of which we haven't seen since like the first patch of early access. So I think there's no question that Unseen is in the weakest form I think it's ever been, and unfortunately I cannot justify taking it on any of my runs, so I do not take it. I've actually talked quite a bit about the Night card already. in how it connects with the Moon card for manaless builds. Even if I don't plan on ever using what this card's text says, which is you have 15% chance to deal critical damage with a move in an Omega combo, I'll still take it for manaless builds if I want the Moon Arcana. It's the cheapest of the three to turn on Moon. Other than that, Knight has a lot of effectiveness on aspects like the aspect of Momus, which wants to use multiple Omegas in an Omega combo. It's pretty straightforward again. Are you using an Omega combo? Yes. Knight is a lot of damage. Critical damage works differently than percentage-based damage increases. It's multiplicative damage scaling. So just to give you an example, Huntress adds 50% attack damage, Furies adds 30% global. So if you had only these two cards active, and you attacked something in your cast while you were missing mana, you would deal 80% more damage. These numbers are additive. They add up. You don't do the 50% multiplier, then the 30%. These multipliers add together. Critical hit chance does not add 2% damage. It adds to itself. Crit chance adds to crit chance, but crit damage will always be a multiplicative roll, so it's nice to have a source of crit. More chance to deal critical damage with an Omega combo is pretty nice for 2 mana. If you're using Omegas, that's great. The Swift Runner, your sprint is 10% faster and lets you pass through most foes in your way. I never turned this off. This is except for the run that I did with Judgement. The Swift Runner, being able to sprint fast and not get body blocked by things with 62 Fear, Valve Hordes is active. There are enemies everywhere. Not being body blocked is fantastic. Being able to move faster is really, really good, especially in some of the final boss fights of the game. Movement speed, I think, is really good against Cerberus. It's really good against Kronos. It's really good against Prometheus, and it's very good against Typhon. These tend to have slightly larger arenas, and a little more mobility for you to get around is definitely very useful. Another reason why Swift Runner is so commonly taken is that this line of cards across the middle of this horizontal, across the middle here, is the new, I think, most likely combination of 5 cards that you'll be taking to activate Divinity. And for that reason, Swift Runner gets an even bigger bonus and an even more reason for me to recommend its use. Great card. I turned it on and pretty much never left it off. Death. You have +3 Death Defiance. It's pretty hard to talk about Death and Strength separately, but what I will say, particularly about Death, is that it rewards strong early game play because the more health you get, the better a Death Defiance is. I think all 12 runs that I used Death instead of Strength. Death Defiances are much easier to recover, I find, than lost max HP or lost HP due to the Vow of Scars. So if I have these Death Defiances, I can get them back from Echo, I can get them back from Wells, I can get them back from Hermes Shrines, I can get them back from Narcissus, I can get them back from, I believe, Athena. I might have mentioned her already, the Gorgon Amulet. Lots of really easy ways to get Death Defiances back. I can get additional ones from Chaos. I can get an additional one from the card being upgraded by Circe. There are a lot of ways to recover Death Defiances, and for that reason I think it's a pretty solid and pretty safe take. Also, like I mentioned before, it factors into this 5 across line. The Centaur. You gain +5 max HP and +5 max mana whenever you pass through 5 locations. If you're not playing a Judgement run, it's actually really hard not to activate Centaur. Like, there's almost no reason to like you would have to not use any of a certain cost of card, and there are just too many good cards if you're playing 30 Grasp for you to not have one of every cost active. So Centaur, you almost don't even really need to think about. It's just always active, and it's a good effect. You get max HP and max mana for carrying on through runs. Pretty solid stuff. Yes, I will say there was a note in chat. Another reason that I really like taking Death over Strength is that if you have additional Death Defiances, the Engraved Pin Keepsake becomes particularly powerful. This will give you 10 seconds of invulnerability to sort of save your Death Defiance. If Engraved Pit is taken, it counts as the Death Defiance effect itself, so it disables strength. Origination. So I was very low on Origination in early access. One sec, water break. I was not a huge fan of Origination. I felt like it really wasn't totally needed on a lot of builds. It was a very overrated card. I still do think that Origination is a slightly overrated card. It has a very difficult fulfilling condition when running Jeweled Palm, which is you must get 2 curses from different Olympians. Oftentimes this can take you off track on your build, and you don't usually need that much damage to win, even at high fear. The thing that changes my mind the most, and the reason that I took Origination for, I believe, all 12 of the 62 fear runs, is that Origination dealing percentage damage scales very well with Jeweled Palm. Jeweled Palm gives +3 palm levels to pretty much every boon you get, and that is a increase of base power in most cases. Anything that's Olympian damage is effectively getting a base power increase, and Origination applying to Olympian damage makes it even stronger. So its effect on things like Zeus's Blitz, Hestia's Scorch, these things are amplified by the fact that Jeweled Palm is making the base versions of these boons even more powerful. So it's a fantastic take. For that reason, it works really well with Hephaestus Blasts, and I really like Blast, Blitz, and Scorch as ways to deal consistent damage in 62 Fear. So for that reason, Origination is almost a must-have at this point because of how well it synergizes with Jeweled Palm. I would consider cutting it if I were doing runs that weren't Palm runs. The Lovers. You take 0 damage the first 3 times you are hit in Guardian encounters. I think a better player than I could get away with not playing this on every run, but I am not that player. 3 free damage shields in Guardian encounters. Guardians, for those of you who don't know, are the bosses. Hecate, Sirens, Cerberus, Kronos, Polyphemus, Eris, Prometheus, and Typhon. There isn't too much more to say other than, wow, damage shields against bosses are good, but I will point out that Lovers is the 5th card sort of in this chain that is the most easy way to turn on the Divinity card. So for that reason, I think it's pretty popular, and I don't think I have to talk too much about why. The 3 cards that I would say are, well, I mean, this one doesn't really count. The cards that I would say are my most obvious advice that you should take this no matter what so far are Lovers, Persistence, and Furies. I don't think anyone would really disagree with wanting to take those 3 cards, unless you're playing a Judgement run. So that's all for Lovers. Next we get to the Enchantress. Unfortunately, the Jeweled Palm Fate's Whim effect does not activate if you have rewards, and so for that reason, I never took Enchantress. I would imagine if you were taking a God Keepsake start, having lots of rerolls is pretty good, and Enchantress is probably worth taking there. There's not too much I can really say about it. It wasn't taken not because I found the card particularly bad, but it had no synergy with the strategy that I was primarily playing. I'll go ahead and say the same thing for the Fates and the Champions. There's really it's the same explanation for all 3 cards. Not that they're bad cards necessarily. They are pretty good cards with, I would imagine, a reroll focused God Keepsake start that's looking for particular combos. It's worth pointing out that with Champions not available to me, it's very difficult to have the Queen active, so the Queen usually wasn't a card that I was able to activate, but that's just the way it goes. Next, let's talk about the Boatman. I think the Boatman is a pretty interesting card. I'll get more into the comparisons when I get to the Excellence card, which I did not use. Boatman, I believe I used for all 12 clears. The reasoning is pretty simple. I think I think Erebus is a really difficult biome, and having a boon in the mid shop that you were always going to go to is definitely worth it. And in Ephira, I think you go without boons for a very long time after fighting Polyphemus, so Boatman giving you one last shot to hit something that you really need, if it's a palm to upgrade a Hep Blast, another boon to hit a duo or a secondary that you really want. I think Boatman increases your early run strength and consistency, and for that reason, I really highly value it. I think it's super good. And yeah, it's not really too much else to say other than that. It's a super solid card. It's obviously less effective than it would be if it was an activation requirement for the Fates and was being run as part of the reroll corner. But 300 gold early on in a run, I think, is absolutely worth 5 grasp, and I'm pretty happy to take it. Artificer, this is another card that I was surprised to find myself taking in all 12 runs. Artificer gives you 3 chances to turn any minor find into a major find. I did not think I would be taking this on the surface. I normally do not enjoy such cards on surface. I actually think I might not have used this on Momus. I might have taken Eternity instead. But Artificer is a super solid card. Essentially, every boon that you get +3 on. This can also be said for Boatman as well. You get 3 palms applied to almost every boon that you get, so having more sources to get more boons, whether it's Boatman's money or in this case, Artificer's chance to turn minor finds into major finds, is very powerful. So getting more and more chances to hit boons is very, very strong. So for that reason, I'm a big fan of Artificer. There's things you can do with it for really hammer-focused runs, like if you're planning to take something like Trick Knives or Possessed Array or Giga Cleaver on a Blade or a Skull, or in Giga Cleaver's case, like the Aspect of Charon. Saving 1 Artificer charge until the Fields of Misery can give you additional chances to roll that hammer using the hammer trick. But I'm not going to go into that too in depth right now. The Artificer is a pretty good card in general. I have a question from chat. If you have the Timepiece, which is a keepsake that lets you transform rewards into gold, and Artificer as a card, how do you manage your charges? I tend to treat them pretty independently. I tend to save my uses of Timepiece for things that my run really doesn't need. Usually that's Palms of Power, because everything's palmed. And if I'm running Manaless, it'll be Mana Pop. If I find that I really want palms for some reason, I'm running a Heft Blast build. Or if I really want mana for some reason, I'm running a lot of Omegas. I just don't even bother with Timepiece. I don't take it. And I'm happy with pretty much any major find that I find with Artificer. So that's sort of how I would approach that situation. But yeah, solid card, Artificer. All right, let's get to Excellence. So for those of you who knew me from the Discords and all that, know that I was a very big Excellence fan during early access. I thought the card was super underrated, definitely had some uses. I played it all the way up to 50 Fear, which was sort of the same as 62 now, just no Val of Rivals. And I was a proponent of it, thought it could do pretty well. Unfortunately, I find that Excellence is more or less replaced in its usefulness in most of my builds with the Jeweled Palm. So, I don't want to get too deep into the mathematics here, but essentially, a increase of rarity from common to rare is usually worth about 1 1/3 to 1.5 or so palms. So the effect of Excellence is essentially applied to almost every boon that you hit already. So Excellence's effect is already being played out. Now there are obviously exceptions to this. Excellence can be a very good card with Heft Blast builds. It can be, well, Hef in general as a god really enjoys Excellence. Chaos, Artemis, Hermes, any boons that don't normally get palm levels really appreciate Excellence. Unfortunately, I just don't think that justifies taking it, and I didn't use it in any of the 12 runs. Another thing that sort of factors into my thinking is that this plus 50% chance is a bit fraudulent when it comes to... I mean, it is completely fraudulent when it comes to the legendary chance. It's multiplicative on legendary, not additive, but it's additive on rare. However, Excellence doesn't do anything if a boon is rarefied to epic by Divinity, and Excellence does very little if the boon was obtained from a mini-boss or a later encounter fight. Like it does some stuff, but it, in particular, mini bosses, they don't do anything. And because it's 62 fear, you have to take Vow of Forfeit. In a lot of biomes, you don't really get a lot of boons other than the ones that you see from the mid bosses. So in that sense, if you have a run where, and it would be a good run where the boons that you need are getting hit by Divinity and you're seeing a lot of mid boss stuff, Excellence isn't really doing very much for you. And all those reasons, combined with the upgrades being presented by Jeweled Palm, is a pretty straightforward argument for me. To me, Excellence directly competes with Boatman in terms of 5 Grasp, and I find getting more boons to be way better than having those boons be slightly stronger. Sad to say, because I am a big Excellence fan. Hopefully there'll be some sort of change in the future that rewards going for it more. I will say also that the release of the Calling card also helps with rarefying things, and there are a lot of really strong rarefying sources already. Hera is an extremely good and flexible god, and if you end up taking her, there's a decent chance you're going to get proper upbringing, which undercuts Excellence completely. There's the Aromatic Vial, which is good for rarefying things. Bridal Glow from Hera is good at rarefying things. The Calling card is good at rarefying things. Excellence just doesn't do a particularly standout job of covering these things, and so for that reason, I don't run the card. I don't recommend it either. Queen. I definitely felt the pain of not being able to run Queen. I don't know that I believe the Judgement run that I did had Queen active, so technically I did use Queen at least once. It's obviously very simple to activate no more than 2 cards that use the same amount of Grasp if you're playing a Judgement run, which activates no more than 3 cards. If you can activate the Queen, it's great. I do know some players, I believe Zergil, I think, they actually don't run either Boatman or Excellence, and what they do instead is they play Strength. And through a different combination of stuff, satisfy the requirements for Queen. And I think if you are hunting a particular duo boon, that could be an interesting way to play, to run Death and Strength and get the effects of Queen. But for the most part, I just don't run it, and I, feel the pain looking for duos. But hopefully I just get lucky and hit. Okay, so we've talked about 22 of the cards so far. Next we have Strength. Strength we've already talked about a little bit, just with Death. I do want to kind of be on the Strength defense squad here. I think this card is probably a little bit underrated, and there are a couple reasons for that. The first one being that it's actually not super common if you're using Omegas, so you have this line available for Divinity, and if you're not running Death, then it's very difficult to find another, and you're not running rerolls, it's very difficult to find another line of 5 cards that will activate Divinity. Unfortunately, for that reason, that's definitely a point in Death's favor. Strength is really good early on in the game. 20% increase of global damage. Early on is very strong. It falls off substantially later in the game, right? Like Furies is stronger than this, and is a much simpler requirement than not running Death Defiances. Taking 40% damage makes max health really good. It also makes healing very good. Unfortunately, healing is sort of banned by Vow of Scars. There is some healing in the game that does work, especially if you're playing on the preview patch. You can get Life Tax, Ghost Onion, Chaos Revival, self-healing. There are ways you can restore your max health, but I would say in general, it's definitely more cumbersome to use than Death. Though I know some people do swear by it. People who speedrun at 62 definitely swear by Strength over Death. So I could definitely see me picking it up on a different weapon in the future, but I didn't use it at all during the 12 runs that I did. Second last, we have Divinity. You've heard me talk a lot about the 5-card Rose. That's because the activation condition for Awakening is to activate all 5 cards in any other column. Divinity is difficult to activate. It's difficult to not have active. Like, it's easy to... you can make a line without too much trouble, especially if you're running these 5 good cards here. And 15% chance for epic is really nice. It still matters in mini boss encounters. It is way more likely to activate over the course of a run in those mini boss encounters, and it's more likely to matter than excellence is. It also can just supercharge your run really early on with some good boons. And in a game like Hades 2, where, like, generally speaking as a community, we don't really care about multi-run performance, like win streaking at a certain difficulty. Mostly what people care about are winning once at really high fear, winning once really, really fast. And for both of those things, Divinity is going to be a much better card than it would normally be, because you only care about the runs when you get lucky and you hit. And in that case, Divinity hits, and you don't have to worry about its downsides, which is that it activates less often than a card like Excellence, for example. You don't have to worry about that, because in the runs that you care about, you just hit. And so for that reason, Divinity is almost always worth having active, and it is worth arranging your cards in such a way that it is always active. And last but not least, we have Judgement. Judgement was one of the cards. I did play one Judgement run in the 62, so I turned off Vow of Forfeit so that I could get boons offered to me right away. And then I ran Judgement, which meant that I I only had certain Arcana cards active. I believe it was Persistence and Strength. So I guess I did take Strength for one of my runs. I stand corrected. I said earlier I didn't take Strength for any of the runs, but I did take Strength for the Judgement run. So sorry about that. I stand corrected there. Judgement activates 5 random Arcana cards every time you vanquish a Guardian. It's fine, cool, very cool. If you're going to play 65 Fear, you have to run Judgement. I wouldn't normally recommend playing it alongside the Jeweled Palm, although you can. And I think turning off Vow of Forfeit and having Judgement in the pool is, I think, a really interesting way to play certain aspects that struggle earlier on in the game. Like, I could see that being pretty good on, like, the aspect of Supe. However, I wouldn't recommend it more than just playing 30 Grasp and using the Jeweled Palm there. So Judgement, a fun card, definitely 62 Fear viable, but I certainly wouldn't recommend it. And with that, we've done all 25 Arcana cards in our Arcana card analysis video. I hope you enjoyed it. My voice feels like it's going to leap out of my body, so I'll say goodbye for now. If you like this video, you like this analysis, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends. If you disagree or you have your own thoughts, let me know in the comments down below. And you can find all of the next runs. I'm going to go for Surface and Underworld 62 Fear with all aspects, and you can find those runs at twitch.tv/east_25. And with that, see you later.